Hey guys, so in today's presentation I want to talk through about some pretty simple and advanced concepts specific to Injective. So like this meme in many ways you can either write a web app, a contract, or WasmX contract for those who are really cool. But for Injective's case, you can take it up a notch and write a WasmX contract. So in a nutshell, this is a self-execution environment for WasmX smart contracts. So we have kind of created our own module for this kind of mechanism called WasmX. So if you would like to read more in depth about this after a presentation, you can just do so by going to the doc site at docs.injective.network. Honestly, might as well just do it in parallel. So if you guys come up with specific questions, you can just ask me at the end of the presentation. So all you need to do to get started is on integrating WasmX into your smart contract is to add a single function, which is begin blocker. So begin blocker is a pseudo function defined within your contract. For those who are unfamiliar with pseudo functions within Wasm, kind of just copy it here, the boilerplate. But it's essentially like a function that only the chain itself can call, and smart contracts can only respond to the incoming messages and do not have the ability to execute these actions on their own schedule. And the WasmX module basically allows contracts to be registered and call in the begin blocker section of every single block. So to be eligible for this, every single registered contract must respond to a pseudo message called begin blocker, which can only be called by chain itself and not directly by any user or any other contract. So this ensures that the begin blocker message can be trusted. So this is kind of like it's kind of shown here contract registration request is the base message for registering these type of new contracts. So upon registering a contract, the user must declare a gas price because basically it's taking from the contract itself to kind of execute on these type of messages, and that's the amount they're willing to pay for the contract execution, and also the gas limit, which is kind of like the maximum amount of gas being consumed during the execution of the contract itself. So currently, contract registration can only be done through a governance proposal for safety and a lot of other reasons. And in this proposal, if it's approved, it will add the contract at a specific address to a list of contracts that are run during each begin blockers period. So for security reasons, the proposer must specify a co-ID for the contract, which will be verified upon registration at each time the contract is executed. And this is to prevent basically an attacker from registering a benign contract, but later on upgrading it to a malicious one. Obviously, in some cases, a proposer can request to be exempt from this check when registering a contract to avoid delays when a new version of the contract is released. But this may affect the voting results because at the end of the day, this is governance gated, depending on the trustworthiness and the reputation of the proposer. The proposer can obviously also request for a contract to be pinned, which is loaded and kept in memory, which greatly improve the performance of the contract itself. So a contract can be deregistered through a governance proposal, which can be initiated by anyone, including contract owner, if they no longer require the contract, or by any other individual if the contract is found to be malicious. So if the contract fails to execute due to insufficient gas, it'll just automatically be deregistered. When the contract is deregistered, the WasmX will call a special deregister callback if it's present as a pseudo message in the contract. So definitely make sure you handle that. And yep, a contract can be deactivated automatically if it runs out of gas, or manually by the contract owner itself. So when a contract is deactivated, WasmX will call the special deactivate callback if it's present as a pseudo message within a contract. The contract can be reactivated by the contract owner again, at their choosing. The WasmX module allows other addresses, contracts, COAs to pay for the begin blocker execution of other contracts through the XV grant module. This is a pretty standardized process. So when a contract is being registered for the first time, the user specify the funding mode, which indicates kind of how the contract's execution will be funded. 3 modes are supported. Self-funded, which means the contract will pay for its own execution. Grant only, which means the contract will execute if its associated allowance covers for it, provided by the grantor address within a contract registration request. And dual, which is basically both. It will prioritize spending its allowances funds. In the case the allowance cannot cover for execution, it'll just use its own fund instead. So given there are 3 kinds of allowances provided by the fee grant module, the WasmX module kind of supports only the basic and periodic, granting an allowance to a contract that's discouraged, as any contract attempting to use this kind of allowance will kind of error by default. So now I'd like to take some time to talk about something unique about what we implemented called message privilege execute contract. So this enables kind of 2 features, position transfer and synthetic trades. So the position transfer is super easy to understand. This is what it would look like from a code perspective, and we actually have used the set data functionality here from Wasm to achieve this. So the way this will work is in Cosmos SCK. Usually you would call this function called like execute contract message and execute it with this. But now you have this new function called message privilege execute contract. So you don't need this directly in your contract, but for someone else interacting with your contract, they should use this message privilege execute contract to execute a smart contract. So from a smart contract perspective, the way you write this is actually pretty simple as well. So if you want to do like a position transfer, this is a position transfer action defined, and it's just defining like a market ID, a source sub-account ID, and also a destination sub-account ID and a quantity. And essentially, this is just transferring some position from your smart contract to the user. So the reason why this is a privileged action is that for a normal position transfer, that will actually be a pretty big security or financial security issue if you would just transfer a position to any random sub-account ID on the chain, because you have a long position for, let's say, like E for INJ, and somebody sends you like a short position of double the size, and now all of a sudden you have your position flipped, even though you technically got some money the moment it happened. Since you don't realize that happened and it just stays open, you might lose a lot of money because now you have a short position when you thought you have a long position. And that's why it has to be a privilege and mutually agreed upon mechanism. And of course, this is safe because if somebody is calling like message privilege execute contract, we can assume that they're trusting a smart contract. The smart contract can only do what the smart contract has defined within the code. So you can assume that a transfer is trusting that you're allowed to send them like a certain position. So this is exactly what we do here. And the way that this works, it's not with a normal response, but rather with the set data. And that's basically just a way where you would like serialize this. And you can use this two binary function from the Wasm SCD. And basically this will serialize the position transfer action and just add it to the response like so. And similar here, we also have synthetic trade. Synthetic trade is not really real trade. It's almost like RFQ order, but rather like a trade simulated between the smart contract and you, where we are actually increasing the position for you and the smart contract. So for example, you would increase the position of the smart contract by 5 long. And if you do that, you would need an kind of like an opposing side to keep the overall market balance. So in this case, it will be the person calling a smart contract, and you would increase it by a quantity of 5, but in the opposing direction, so short. So essentially, synthetic trade is a derivative market that creates two balanced positions, regardless of what happens on the order book. And that's pretty much it. It's a very short and simple kind of talk, pretty informationally dense. So happy to open up the Q&A section for like anyone who has any question.
For the begin blocker ones, is there a mechanism for like changing the gas price?
Currently, I don't think so, because that's kind of like a registration process. You can just set like a higher like a cap on it, and then like the execution would just go by like the open market price.
And so the proposer has an option to just like not include it if it doesn't fit their gas price needs?
What do you mean?
Let's say
no, it's mandatory.
What?
It's mandatory field. Yeah.
So then what? So the gas price is only sort of relevant at like the time of whether governance should accept this at all or not.
Yeah.
It's not like actually used for determining whether to include it or not.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, is there any worry that you might have, I don't know, like a dozen contracts registered through this?
So that's why it's governance gated.
Yeah. So I guess this would then
because
never
later on there can be like an open marketplace for it. So basically the registration and deregistration is no longer governance controlled, but rather kind of like an open marketplace. But since like Osmosis is pretty nascent, it could like potentially, because of some like new security exploit, like cause like a hold, etc. So generally we would like to keep it like a governance gated for now.
Sure. And what do you see as like a primary use case for this? Every block.
The benefit, there's a lot. So first of all, like it's a cheap crank, relatively speaking, depending on like your use case. But more importantly, it's almost like a guaranteed execution where like you can trust it. It's almost like a like an MEV shortcut for a style of utility. So like the actual registration of a specific contract could be like a pretty generic, unopinionated utility contract. It's like, oh, like I want to do something, and then like I want it to be guaranteed to be done at like a decent premium. And basically, this is kind of like like the contract will kind of like do that for you. It will just open up, or like you pay like some kind of like upfront fee for it.
And finally, Injective has pretty short block times. So do you ever foresee, I guess, like an extension to or modification to the system where many contracts may not need their info to be to be cranked every second or sub-second, but instead maybe every minute or every 30 minutes or hour. So
yeah, so this is why like like you could register like a generic contract that kind of like does the scheduling for people. But there's obviously like other like solutions. I remember like What Protocol, et cetera, that just like an open marketplace. So because do keep in mind like. It's cheap if you're trying to execute every single block, but it's very, very expensive. Like if you're just trying to do it like at most like once every minute or like once every hour.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, this is sort of a tangential question, but how does the gas market work on Injective right now? Is it a fixed
price?
price?
Yeah, it's pretty
all the
standardized. Yeah. It's not fixed per se because like validators or like nodes can like choose, but like
So
practically speaking,
in the normal off-chain Cosmos way.
Yeah.
So for registering, deregistering, is that like pausing the contract from being executed, or is that?
Yeah. So like basically it's like code ID gated to be able to like even execute to begin with, but then like pausing is register, basically deactivated.
Okay. So what other functionality are you imagining in the future for WasmX?
Yeah, so like like kind of like the example you mentioned before, it could be like kind of like an open like type of crank system where it's like, oh, like I want to do it like a cron job like every 5 seconds, every 10 minutes. Like those would be like a unified like contract for like handling all these requests and like a slightly. It could be just a utility contract for people to access at like a fee premium. But also more importantly, like market making, but also like on-chain strategy, et cetera, and also quite a lot of these type of like safe execution mechanisms. Those are like all super important because it's almost like a guaranteed kind of like time till cancel type of order, which you kind of get that guarantee of execution. So for example, like on Injective, like all the orders on chain are kind of immutable by default, so it means that it will never be canceled, practically speaking, unless governance intervenes. So this means that like if you want to have like a, let's say like an expiry or like an expiration, you probably want to rely on like like a contract registered through like WasmX to like guarantee execute at a certain height.
Thank you.
So.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.